Famous pianist returns to shock the teacher who once broke her heart. Adrian's hands froze above the piano keys as the wedding planner's voice shattered his world. The pianist just arrived, Lydia Moreau, the international sensation. 12 years of carefully buried feelings erupted as footsteps approached the chapel door. His daughter's wedding was tomorrow. The woman who had haunted his dreams was here to play it, and she had no idea he was the father of the bride. The ivory keys blurred before his eyes as memories crashed through his carefully constructed defenses. Lydia at 18, her dark eyes shining with musical passion as she mastered Chopin under his guidance. The way her slender fingers had danced across these same keys, creating magic that had stolen his breath and nearly stolen his heart. The moment he'd realized she was falling for him and the devastating decision he'd made to push her away to protect them both. "Professor Sinclair?" Elena Santiago's cheerful voice cut through his paralysis. "Did you hear me? We actually managed to book Lydia Moreau for Sage's wedding. Can you believe it? She's performed with the London Symphony, the Berlin Philharmonic. Your daughter is getting married to Chopin, played by one of the world's finest pianists." Adrian forced his trembling hands to still, pressing them flat against the piano bench. His salt and pepper hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the chapel's stained glass windows, and he struggled to find his voice. When did she arrive?" "Just now. She's bringing in her equipment." "Oh, there she is." The chapel doors opened with a soft whisper, and time folded in on itself. Lydia Moreau stepped into the sacred space, and Adrian's heart forgot how to beat properly. 12 years had transformed the earnest teenager into a woman of extraordinary grace. She moved with the disciplined posture of someone who'd spent countless hours perfecting her craft, yet there was a natural elegance that no amount of training could create. Her dark hair was swept into a sophisticated twist, and she wore a simple black dress that spoke of understated luxury. Their eyes met across the chapel's center aisle, and the world shifted on its axis. Recognition flickered in her expressive dark eyes, followed by shock so profound he watched her breath catch. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, they were teacher and student again, surrounded by the ghost of possibilities that had never been allowed to bloom. "Lydia, I'd like you to meet the father of the bride," Elena said, oblivious to the electricity crackling between them. "This is Adrian Sinclair, Sage's father." Lydia's composure was remarkable, Adrian thought distantly. Only someone who knew her as well as he once had would notice the slight tremor in her hands, the way her professional smile didn't quite reach those expressive eyes that had once looked at him with such unguarded adoration. "Professor Sinclair," she said, her voice carrying the refined polish of someone accustomed to concert halls and international acclaim. Yet beneath the sophistication, he heard echoes of the girl who used to argue passionately about musical interpretation. "It's good to see you again." The understatement hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. "Miss Moreau." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Congratulations on your success. I've followed your career." A shadow crossed her features so quickly he almost missed it. "Have you?" Before he could respond, the chapel doors burst open again, and his daughter bounded in with the radiant energy that had lit up his world since the day she was born. At 25, Sage had her mother's delicate features but his deep brown eyes, and right now those eyes sparkled with wedding day excitement. "Dad, you have to hear this pianist Elena found for us. She's absolutely incredible," and Sage stopped mid-sentence, her gaze shifting between her father and the elegant woman standing near the altar. Something flickered across her intelligent face, a puzzle piece trying to find its place. "Oh, hello. I'm Sage, the bride." "Lydia Moreau," Lydia replied, extending her hand with professional warmth. "It's an honor to be part of your special day." "Lydia Moreau. Why does that name sound familiar?" Sage tilted her head, studying the pianist with curious intensity. "Dad, didn't you mention that name before? When I was taking lessons as a kid, you used to talk about this incredibly talented student you once taught." Adrian's world tilted dangerously. "Sage, that's right." His daughter's face lit up with delighted recognition. "You're the student Dad always said was the most naturally gifted musician he'd ever taught. He said you could make the piano weep or laugh, that you played with your soul, not just your fingers." The color drained from Lydia's face, and Adrian watched her struggle to maintain her professional composure. Your father was a very influential teacher. He still talks about you sometimes, Sage continued innocently. He says you're proof that great teaching can help someone reach heights beyond what anyone imagined possible. The chapel fell silent except for the soft echo of Sage's words bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. Adrian couldn't breathe properly. Lydia looked like she might flee at any moment. Elena checked her clipboard, mercifully unaware of the emotional undercurrents threatening to pull everyone under. Well, Elena said brightly, this is perfect. You already know each other. That should make the coordination so much easier. Lydia, shall we discuss the musical selections? Before anyone could respond, the chapel doors opened once more, and Jules Wellington entered with his characteristic confident stride. At 27, Jules possessed the easy charm and polished appearance of someone born to privilege, and he'd won Adrian's grudging approval by genuinely loving Sage for who she was beneath her own privileged upbringing. There's my beautiful bride-to-be, Jules said, crossing to Sage and pressing a kiss to her temple. His gaze fell on Lydia with appreciative interest. You must be the famous pianist Mother insisted we hire. Jules Wellington. Lydia Moreau, she replied, shaking his offered hand. Your mother has exquisite taste in music. She certainly does. She was absolutely thrilled when your manager confirmed you were available, said it would make our wedding the social event of the season. Jules's smile was genuinely warm. Though, honestly, Sage and I just want beautiful music for our ceremony. That's exactly what you'll have, Lydia assured him, but Adrian noticed her fingers worry the strap of her music bag. Elena clapped her hands together. Perfect! Now, let's discuss the musical selections. Lydia, I have the list of pieces the bride and groom requested, but I'd love your professional input on what works best for the acoustics in here. As Elena launched into logistics, Adrian found himself studying Lydia with desperate intensity. 12 years had refined her beauty, added depths to those dark eyes that had once looked at him with such trust and growing affection. The girl who'd hung on his every word about musical theory had become a woman whose own interpretation of the classics was now studied by students worldwide. Yet beneath the polished exterior, he glimpsed flashes of the passionate teenager who'd argued with him about Rachmaninoff's true intentions, who'd played Chopin with such raw emotion that he'd had to step outside to regain his composure. The woman who'd haunted his dreams and made him question everything about duty, appropriateness, and the prices we pay for doing what others consider right. Professor Sinclair? Elena's voice snapped him back to the present. Do you have any thoughts on the prelude selection? Adrian cleared his throat, acutely aware of Lydia's gaze on him. Perhaps something that speaks to new beginnings, to the courage it takes to commit your heart completely. Lydia's sheet music slipped from her fingers, scattering across the chapel floor in a flutter of white pages. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me help. Adrian moved without conscious thought, kneeling beside her to gather the fallen sheets. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same page of Chopin's ballad number 1, and the contact sent electricity up his arm. For a moment, neither moved. Her fingers were warm beneath his, slightly calloused from years of dedicated practice. And he remembered how those same hands had trembled the first time he held them. Time he'd guided them to the correct position on the keys. How she'd looked up at him with such gratitude and growing awareness that he'd known he was walking toward a precipice that could destroy them both. Thank you, she whispered, and in her voice he heard echoes of the girl who'd once whispered his name like a prayer. They rose together, the moment stretching between them like a held note waiting for resolution. Sage watched them with growing curiosity, her intelligent mind clearly processing something she couldn't quite name. Jules remained oblivious, examining the chapel's architecture with the eye of someone planning a perfect wedding day. Well, Elena said, consulting her clipboard again, I think we have everything we need for now. Lydia, you'll want to do a sound check this evening, won't you? Yes, around 8 o'clock if that works for everyone. Perfect. Professor Sinclair, will you be here for the sound check? I know how particular you are about acoustics. Adrian's mouth went dry. An evening alone with Lydia, surrounded by music and memory? Yes, I should be here. Wonderful. Elena gathered her papers with efficient satisfaction. Jules, we need to confirm the flower arrangements. Sage, your final dress fitting is in an hour. And Lydia, thank you again for making this possible. Having someone of your caliber perform at our ceremony is truly special. As the small group began to disperse, Adrian found himself walking toward the exit beside Lydia. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the chapel floor, and their footsteps echoed in harmony, a rhythm he remembered from countless lessons when she would walk beside him to the piano, eager to begin. Adrian. His name on her lips stopped him cold. She hadn't called him professor, hadn't maintained the formal distance that protocol demanded, just his name, spoken like she was testing how it felt after 12 years of silence. He turned to face her fully, and the late light caught the gold flecks in her dark eyes. Lydia. I didn't know, she said quietly. When they told me the bride was Sage Sinclair, I never connected. I didn't realize she was your daughter. She was 13 when you studied with me. Sarah, back then. She started using her middle name, Sage, in college. Sarah. Understanding dawned in her expression. The little girl who used to practice violin while we had lessons. She always said she wanted to make music as beautiful as her father's student. The memory hit him like a physical blow. She admired you tremendously. And now she's getting married. Lydia's smile held a wistfulness that made his chest ache. She's beautiful, Adrian. She looks happy. She is. Jules is a good man. He loves her for who she is, not what he thinks she should become. Something shifted in Lydia's expression, and he realized how his words might sound, like a criticism of his own past choices. Adrian, about what happened. Miss Moreau, a new voice interrupted them. A tall man with sharp features and an expensive suit approached from the parking area. I've been looking for you. Adrian watched Lydia's face transform, professional mask sliding back into place. Marcus, I didn't expect you here. Change of plans. We need to discuss the Singapore engagement. Marcus Walter's eyes took in Adrian with calculating assessment. You must be the, bride's family. Adrian Sinclair, Sage's father. Marcus's handshake was firm but brief, his attention clearly focused on Lydia. Lydia is incredibly in demand, as I'm sure you understand. We've had to turn down 3 major venues this month alone. But not this one, Adrian said quietly. No, Lydia said, her gaze finding his again. Not this one. Marcus placed a proprietary hand on Lydia's lower back, a gesture that made Adrian's jaw clench involuntarily. Shall we discuss the scheduling changes over dinner? I made reservations at that place you like downtown. Actually, I have a sound check this evening. Surely that can wait. No. Lydia's voice carried a firmness that brooked no argument. It can't. Adrian found himself stepping closer, some protective instinct overriding years of careful emotional control. The acoustics in this chapel are quite specific. A proper sound check is essential for tomorrow's performance. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. And you are? A musician, Adrian replied simply. Adrian teaches at the Harmony Conservatory, Lydia added. He understands the technical requirements. I see. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well then, I suppose dinner will have to wait. I'll see you at the hotel later, Lydia. We have contracts to review. He leaned down to kiss her cheek, a public claiming that made Adrian's hands curl into fists. Lydia submitted to the gesture with gracious tolerance, but Adrian caught the slight tension in her shoulders. After Marcus departed, the silence between them grew heavy with unspoken history. Your manager seems attentive, Adrian said carefully. Marcus handles my career very well. Lydia's tone was neutral, professional. He's built me into a brand. And is that what you wanted? To become a brand. She studied his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed. You know, 12 years ago you taught me that sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect the things that matter most. The words hit their target with precision. Lydia, I should go prepare for this evening. The sound check is important, as you said. She gathered her music bag with movements that were just a little too controlled. I'll see you at 8, Professor Sinclair. She walked away with the same graceful posture he remembered, But now there was an armor around her that hadn't existed when she was 18, an armor he'd helped forge with his rejection. Adrian remained in the chapel long after everyone had left, sitting at the piano where this had all started. His fingers found the keys without conscious thought, playing the opening measures of Chopin's Ballade number, the piece Lydia had been working on during their final lesson together, the piece she'd played with such emotion that he'd known, with terrifying certainty, that she was falling in love with him. The same piece that had scattered from her hands this afternoon when their fingers touched, as the melody filled the empty chapel. Adrian closed his eyes and let himself remember what he'd spent 12 years trying to forget. The way she'd looked at him that last day, hope and longing and pure trust shining in her young face. The way his heart had nearly burst from his chest when she'd whispered, "Professor Sinclair." "Adrian, I think I'm—" He'd stopped her before she could finish the sentence, had told her gently but firmly that she was a brilliant student with a bright future ahead of her, and that she mustn't confuse admiration for her teacher with deeper feelings. He'd recommended her to his colleague at Juilliard, helped arrange her transfer, and convinced himself he was protecting her from making a mistake that could derail her promising career. He'd never told her that he'd been falling just as hard, that her name was the last thing he whispered before sleep and the first thought upon waking, that losing her had felt like losing a limb, phantom pain that never quite healed. Now she was here, successful beyond both their wildest dreams, and the connection between them still hummed with the same dangerous electricity. But she was no longer 18, no longer his student. She was a woman who'd built an extraordinary life, who carried herself with hard-won confidence and sophistication, and tomorrow she would play at his daughter's wedding, then disappear from his life again. Unless he found the courage to finally tell her the truth about why he'd sent her away. The chapel bells chimed 7 o'clock, and Adrian realized he'd been playing for over an hour. His hands stilled on the keys as footsteps echoed from the entrance. "Dad?" Sage appeared in the doorway, still glowing with bridal radiance despite the stress of final preparations. "I thought I heard music." "That was beautiful. What was it?" "Chopin, Ballade number, 1 minute." "I remember that piece. Didn't one of your students used to play it? The one you always said was so gifted?" Sage's expression grew thoughtful as she approached the piano. "Dad, is everything okay? You seem, I don't know, different since this afternoon." Adrian's hands rested on the keys, and he found himself studying his daughter's face. When had she become so perceptive? When had those brown eyes, so much like his own, learned to see through his carefully maintained composure? "Tomorrow's your wedding day," he said softly. "It's natural to feel emotional." "That's not what this is." Sage sat beside him on the piano bench, the same spot where he'd taught her simple melodies when she was small. "This is about her, isn't it?" "About Lydia Moreau." The directness of the question caught him off guard. "Sage, Dad, I may be getting married tomorrow, but I'm not blind. The way you two looked at each other this afternoon. There's history there. Real history." Adrian's fingers found a simple melody, something soft and contemplative. "She was my student, a long time ago. And nothing. I was her teacher. She was 18. There are boundaries that exist for good reasons." Sage was quiet for a long moment, listening to the gentle music. Then she said, "Mom's been gone for 3 years, Dad." His hands stilled on the keys. "What does that have to do with anything? You've been alone all this time. Not dating, not even looking interested in anyone. I thought maybe you just weren't ready, but seeing you today, maybe you just haven't met anyone who could compete with a memory." "Sage, this is neither the time nor place." "When is the right time?" His daughter's voice carried a gentle challenge. "Tomorrow I'll be married, starting my own life. When do you get to start living again instead of just existing?" The words hit him like a physical blow. "I am living." "No, you're surviving. There's a difference." Sage reached over and stilled his restless fingers. "Dad, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at her today. Not even Mom, though I know you loved her desperately." Adrian's breath caught. "Sage, I loved Mom too. But she's gone, and she would never have wanted you to stop living because of it. You taught me that music isn't just about playing the notes perfectly. It's about the passion and emotion you bring to them. When's the last time you played your life with passion instead of just hitting the right notes? Before he could respond, the chapel doors opened, and Lydia entered carrying a small equipment bag. She moved with purpose toward the piano area, then stopped when she saw them. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize anyone would be here. I can wait." "No, please." Sage stood quickly. "Dad and I were just talking. I should get back anyway. Jules is taking me to dinner with his parents." She kissed Adrian's cheek, then surprised everyone by turning to Lydia. "Thank you for doing this. It means more than you know." After Sage left, the chapel settled into intimate quiet. Lydia unpacked her equipment methodically, adjusting settings with the precision of someone accustomed to making every venue perfect. Adrian remained at the piano, watching her work. "She's lovely," Lydia said without looking up. "Sage, she has your eyes, but there's something else, a warmth that must come from her mother." Isabel was sunshine in human form. She could light up any room just by walking into it. Lydia's hands stilled on her equipment. "Isabel, that's a beautiful name. She died 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm so sorry." Lydia's voice carried genuine sympathy. "I can't imagine how difficult that must have been." It was. But we had 18 wonderful years together, and she gave me Sage. I can't regret that. Lydia finished her setup and turned to face him fully. In the evening light, filtering through stained glass, she looked ethereal and achingly familiar. "Will you play with me?" For the sound check? The question hung between them, loaded with meanings neither dared voice. "What did you have in mind?" "The piece you were playing when I arrived. Chopin's Ballade number, 1 minute. I'd like to hear how it sounds in this space." Adrian's hands found the keys without hesitation, muscle memory taking over as the haunting melody filled the chapel. After a few measures, Lydia joined him, her part weaving around his with the kind of musical conversation that only happened between musicians who truly understood each other. They played as if 12 years hadn't passed, as if all the carefully constructed walls between them were made of smoke. The music became a language they both spoke fluently, expressing things that words could never capture. When the last note faded into silence, neither moved for a long moment. "Your touch has changed," Lydia said softly. "It's deeper now. More complex. So is yours. You've found your own voice." "Have I?" She turned to face him on the piano bench, and suddenly they were 18 again, teacher and student caught in a moment of recognition that neither could deny. "Sometimes I think I'm still playing what I think people want to hear instead of what's in my heart." The confession hung between them like a bridge, dangerous and tempting. "What's in your heart, Lydia?" She studied his face with an intensity that made him feel transparent. "Questions that I never got to ask. Feelings that I never got to express." Adrian's world tilted. This was the moment he'd both dreaded and longed for since she'd walked into the chapel that afternoon. The moment when they would finally address the elephant that had been sitting in the room for 12 years. "Lydia, why?" The single word carried 12 years of hurt and confusion. "Why did you send me away? And don't tell me it was just about propriety or professional boundaries. I felt the way you looked at me during those final lessons. I felt the connection between us when we played together. It wasn't one-sided. Adrian's carefully constructed defenses crumbled like sand. No, it wasn't one-sided." "Then why?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the chapel's altar, as if distance could protect them both from what he was about to admit. "Because I was 36 years old, and you were 18. Because I was your teacher, in a position of authority over you. Because I was married, even if that marriage had become more friendship than passion. But because I was falling in love with you." The words ripped from his throat like a confession in the confessional. "Because every lesson became torture, sitting beside you, breathing your perfume, watching your face light up when you mastered a difficult passage. Because I started composing pieces just to see if I could capture the way you made music come alive." Lydia's gasp echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Because," Adrian continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I knew that if I didn't send you away, I was going to destroy both our lives by falling completely, irrevocably in love with you. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. When Adrian finally turned around, he found Lydia standing behind him, tears streaming down her face. "You loved me?" she whispered. "I loved you," he confirmed. "God help me. I loved you so much it terrified me." "Then why didn't you?" "Because love isn't always enough, Lydia. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is protect someone from yourself. You had such a brilliant future ahead of you. You deserved to explore the world, to become the artist you were meant to be, without being tied down by an inappropriate relationship with your teacher. That should have been my choice to make. You were 18. I was supposed to be the responsible adult." Lydia moved closer, her eyes blazing with an emotion he couldn't quite read. "I'm 30 now, Adrian. I've seen the world. I've become the artist you said I could be. And I'm telling you that sending me away was the worst mistake you ever made." Before he could respond, she closed the remaining distance between them. Her hands came up to frame his face, her thumbs brushing away tears he hadn't realized were falling. "I loved you too," she whispered. "I loved you with everything I had, and when you sent me away, it nearly destroyed me. Do you know what it's like to carry unrequited love for 12 years? To measure every man against someone who made it clear you weren't worth fighting for?" "Lydia, that's not—" "Isn't it?" Her voice broke. "You chose the safe path. You chose propriety over possibility. You chose to protect your reputation instead of taking a chance on us. I chose to protect you. From what? From love? From the chance to choose my own path?" They stood facing each other in the dim chapel light, 12 years of hurt and longing and unspoken truths crackling between them like electricity before a storm. "What would you have had me do?" Adrian asked, his voice raw. "Destroy my marriage? Risk your future? Have people whisper that your success came from sleeping with your teacher instead of your talent? I would have had you trust me enough to let me make my own decisions about what I wanted." Lydia's hands dropped from his face, but she didn't step back. "I would have had you believe that what we felt was worth fighting for, even if it meant facing some difficult choices. And if we'd tried and failed? If the age difference, the circumstances, the public scrutiny had torn us apart anyway? Then at least we would have known. At least we wouldn't have spent 12 years wondering, what if?" The words hung between them like a challenge, and Adrian felt something shift in his chest. She was right. They were both right, in their own ways, but that didn't make the pain any less real. "I wrote you letters," he said quietly. "After you transferred to Juilliard. Hundreds of them. I never sent a single one." Lydia's breath caught. "What did they say?" "That I missed you. That I was proud of your achievements. That I was sorry for hurting you." He paused, gathering courage. "That I loved you and hoped someday you'd forgive me for being a coward." "Adrian, I followed your career obsessively. Every review, every performance, every interview. When you played with the London Symphony for the first time, I bought a recording and played it so many times I wore out the CD. I played that entire concert thinking of you," she whispered, "wondering if you were listening somewhere, if you were proud of what I'd become. I was. I am. You exceeded every dream I had for you. But what about your dreams for us?" The question pierced him to the core. "I buried those the day I sent you away." Lydia studied his face in the dying light, and he saw her processing everything they'd just confessed to each other. The air between them hummed with possibility and danger in equal measure. "Your daughter's getting married tomorrow," she said finally. "Yes. And I'm supposed to play at her wedding." "Yes. And then I'm supposed to leave and go back to my life." "That's what's expected. What if I don't want to do what's expected anymore?" Her voice was barely audible, but it carried the weight of 12 years of suppressed longing. "What if I want to find out what might have been?" Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. "Lydia, I'm not 18 anymore, Adrian. I'm not your student. I'm a successful woman who spent 12 years learning who she is and what she wants. And what I want is a chance to explore this connection we never got to finish. The complications will still exist tomorrow whether we acknowledge this or not, But tomorrow your daughter will be married and starting her new life. Tomorrow I'll be just another wedding vendor who did her job and left. Tonight is all we have." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, could smell the subtle perfume that had haunted his dreams for 12 years. "One night," she whispered, "to finally say all the things we never got to say. To see if what we felt was real or just a beautiful memory we've been clinging to." Adrian's resolve crumbled like sheet music in the rain. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs tracing the elegant lines of her cheekbones. "If we do this," he said hoarsely, "there's no going back. No pretending it didn't happen. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward, finally. The timing is impossible. Your career, my life here, the age difference that people will always whisper about, are all just obstacles, not impossibilities." Her hands covered his, warm and steady. "Unless you don't feel it anymore. Unless 12 years has killed whatever was between us." In response, Adrian leaned down until their foreheads touched, until they shared the same breath and the same desperate hope. "It nearly killed me to let you go the first time," he whispered. "I don't think I'm strong enough to do it again." "Then don't." The kiss was inevitable, 12 years in the making. Soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid this moment might shatter like spun glass. Then deeper, desperate, all the words they'd never spoken pouring between them in a language older than music. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. "Come home with me," Adrian said, the words torn from somewhere deeper than thought. "Let me show you the letters I never sent. Let me tell you about all the nights I dreamed of you. Let me love you the way I should have 12 years ago." Lydia's answer was another kiss, this one full of promise and surrender and the courage to finally choose love over safety. Chapter 2. Adrian's house stood in quiet elegance at the end of a tree-lined street, its traditional architecture softened by climbing roses and the gentle glow of porch lights. As they walked up the brick pathway together, Lydia felt like she was stepping into a dream she'd carried for 12 years, one where this moment was finally possible. "Sage doesn't live here anymore," Adrian said, his voice carrying a nervousness that made him seem younger somehow. "She moved in with Jules 6 months ago. I keep meaning to downsize, but it holds too many memories," Lydia finished softly. He paused at the front door, key in hand. "Are you sure about this?" "Once we cross this threshold together, everything changes." Instead of answering with words, Lydia placed her hand over his on the key. "I've been sure for 12 years. I just finally have the courage to act on it." The interior of Adrian's home reflected the man she was coming to know all over again, elegant but comfortable, filled with music and books and photographs that told the story of a life lived with quiet dignity. A grand piano dominated the living room, its polished surface reflecting the soft lamplight. Sheet music covered the bench and surrounding surfaces, evidence of a creative mind that never rested. "Your study?" Lydia asked, noticing the room off the main hallway. Adrian nodded, then led her through French doors into a space that felt like the heart of the house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with musical scores, theory texts, and literature. A smaller, upright piano sat in one corner, surrounded by composition notebooks. But what drew Lydia's attention was the desk, and the wooden box sitting atop it. "The letters," Adrian said quietly, following her gaze. Lydia approached the desk slowly, as if the box might disappear if she moved too quickly. "May I?" Adrian lifted the lid himself, revealing hundreds of pages covered in his familiar handwriting. Letters dated from just weeks after she'd transferred to Juilliard, continuing sporadically over the years. The most recent was dated only 6 months ago. "You really wrote to me for 12 years, she breathed, lifting the top letter with trembling fingers. "Not every day, but whenever missing you became unbearable." She unfolded the most recent letter, her eyes scanning his familiar handwriting. "My dearest Lydia, I heard your performance of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 on the radio today. The reviewer called it transcendent, and I found myself crying in my empty kitchen, so proud of what you've become, so devastated by what I threw away. You played it the way we used to discuss it during our lessons. with that perfect balance of technical mastery and emotional truth that made you so extraordinary even at 18. I wonder if you remember those conversations, or if you've moved so far beyond them that they're just shadows in your past. I'm 54 now, too old to be writing love letters to a woman I haven't seen in over a decade. But listening to you play, I was 36 again, and you were my brilliant student who made me believe in magic. Some loves, I think, exist outside of time. Lydia's hands shook as she set the letter down. Adrian, I know it's pathetic. It's beautiful. She turned to face him fully, tears streaming down her cheeks, and heartbreaking, and exactly what I needed to hear. What do you mean? I mean that I've spent 12 years wondering if what we had was real, or just a fantasy I built up in my memory. Reading this, knowing you felt it too, that you never forgot. She picked up another letter, this one from several years ago. It makes me feel less crazy for carrying this torch for so long. Adrian moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. You weren't crazy. What we felt, it was the most real thing I've ever experienced. Then why are we both so terrified? Because real love is terrifying. It requires us to be vulnerable, to risk everything we've built for the possibility of something extraordinary. Lydia set the letters down and turned to face him fully. In the soft light of his study, surrounded by the evidence of his artistic life and his enduring feelings for her, she felt like she was finally home. I've built an extraordinary career, she said quietly. I've performed in the world's greatest concert halls, earned standing ovations from audiences who don't even know my name. But I've never felt as alive as I did during those lessons with you, when music was a conversation between our souls instead of a performance for strangers. Adrian's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears she hadn't realized were still falling. I've spent 12 years teaching other students, watching them grow and succeed, and feeling proud but hollow, like I was going through the motions of the life I was supposed to want instead of the life my heart craved. What does your heart crave, Adrian? You, he said simply. It's always been you. The kiss that followed was different from the desperate claiming in the chapel. This was slow, exploratory, full of wonder that they were finally free to touch each other without guilt or fear of discovery. Lydia's hands tangled in his salt and pepper hair, marveling at how the silver strands caught the light, how distinguished he'd become while she wasn't looking. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. There's something else, Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion. Something I need to show you. He moved to the smaller piano in the corner, lifting a composition notebook from the bench. The pages were worn from handling, covered in musical notation and crossed-out measures. I started writing this the week after you transferred to Juilliard, he said, his fingers tracing the title page. Lydia's song. I could never finish it. Every time I tried, it felt like I was trying to capture sunlight in my hands. Lydia's breath caught. You wrote a piece for me? I tried to. I wanted to create something that captured the way you made music come alive, the passion you brought to every note. But how do you compose a woman's laugh? How do you notate the way someone's eyes light up when they discover a new musical truth? Play it for me. What you have of it. Adrian's hands found the keys, and the melody that emerged was hauntingly beautiful, complex and yearning, full of unresolved harmonies that seemed to reach toward something just beyond their grasp. It was unmistakably her, Lydia realized. The musical phrases mirrored the way she moved through complicated passages, the rhythms echoed her natural cadences. When he reached the point where the composition ended abruptly, his hands stilled on the keys. That's where I always get stuck, he said. I know how it should resolve, but I could never find the right ending. Lydia moved to sit beside him on the piano bench, their bodies warm against each other in the intimate space. She placed her hands on the keys beside his, fingers finding the melody line he'd established. What if, she said softly, beginning to play a complementary harmony, the piece wasn't meant to end? What if it was meant to transform? Her melody wove around his, taking his unfinished thoughts and carrying them in new directions. Together, they began to improvise, their musical conversation flowing as naturally as breath. His melody became the foundation, her variations the flight, and together they created something neither could have achieved alone. The music swelled and danced around them, filling the study with sounds that had been waiting 12 years to be born. When they finally let the last notes fade into silence, they remained sitting close together, overwhelmed by the beauty they'd created. "Now it's finished," Lydia whispered. "No," Adrian said, turning to look at her with eyes full of love and wonder. "Now it's just beginning." This time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no fear of crossing forbidden lines. She was no longer his student, no longer 18 and uncertain. She was a woman who knew her own mind, who had chosen to be here, in this moment, with him. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt as his mouth moved to her neck, pressing gentle kisses to the sensitive skin there. Every touch felt like coming home and beginning an adventure all at once. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her collarbone. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Have you ever had someone from your past walk back into your life at the most unexpected moment, stirring up feelings you thought were long buried? Tell me your story in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if Adrian's shock is already making your heart race for what's coming next." They moved together through the house like dancers who'd finally found their rhythm, hands linked, stopping to share kisses and whispered confessions along the way. In the hallway, Adrian pressed her against the wall, his mouth hungry and reverent as it explored the curve of her neck. "I dreamed of this," he murmured against her skin. "So many nights I dreamed of touching you, of being able to show you how much you meant to me." "I dreamed of it too," she confessed, her hands mapping the planes of his chest beneath his open shirt. "Even when I tried to move on, tried to fall for other men, it was always you I thought of in the quiet moments." His bedroom was a reflection of the man she was learning to love all over again, simple but elegant, with windows that looked out over a small garden. Moonlight streamed through the gauze curtains, casting everything in silver and shadow. Adrian paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain again. "Lydia, if we do this," she silenced him with a finger to his lips. "No more talking about consequences or complications. This moment exists outside of all that. This moment is just ours." She began to undress him slowly, reverently, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed his shirt from his shoulders. 12 years of wondering, of imagining, had built this moment up in her mind, but the reality was somehow both simpler and more profound than any fantasy. When he returned the favor, easing her dress from her shoulders and letting it pool at their feet, his hands shook with the magnitude of finally being allowed to touch her this way. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Even more beautiful than I remembered. I'm 30, Adrian. I have scars and imperfections. You're perfect," he said firmly, his hands tracing the elegant line of her collarbone, the graceful curve of her shoulder. "You're absolutely perfect." They came together on his bed, like two halves of a melody finally finding harmony. Every touch was both familiar and new, as if their bodies recognized each other despite the years apart. Adrian worshipped her with his hands and mouth, mapping every inch of skin he'd dreamed of touching, while Lydia discovered the man he'd become, broader through the shoulders, silver threading through the hair on his chest, laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of years lived fully despite his loneliness. When he finally moved over her, their eyes locked in the moonlight, the magnitude of the moment settled over them both. "I love you," he whispered, the words torn from somewhere deeper than his chest. "I've loved you for 12 years, and I'll love you for 12 more, and 12 after that." "I love you too," she replied, her hands framing his face, thumbs tracing his cheekbones. "I never stopped loving you, even when I tried to convince myself I had." Their joining was slow and reverent, 12 years of longing finally finding expression in the language of skin against skin, breath mingling with breath. They moved together like musicians who'd found perfect tempo, building toward something that transcended the physical and touched the divine. Time seemed to stop as they discovered each other with the wonder of new lovers and the deep recognition of old souls finally reunited. Every kiss, every caress, every whispered endearment was both a claiming and a surrender. When release finally claimed them both, it was with the intensity of a musical crescendo that had been building for over a decade. They clung to each other as waves of sensation washed over them, both crying from the sheer emotional overwhelm of finally being complete. Afterward, they lay entwined in the moonlight, skin cooling in the night air, hearts slowly returning to normal rhythm. "What happens now?" Lydia asked softly, her head pillowed on Adrian's chest, his arms tightened around her. "I don't know. But for the first time in 12 years, I'm not afraid of the answer." She lifted her head to look at him, studying the face she'd memorized so long ago and was now learning all over again. "Your daughter's wedding is in less than 12 hours. "Yes. And I'm supposed to play the piano like a consummate professional." "Yes. And pretend that her father didn't just make love to me so beautifully that I'm not sure I remember how to function in the real world." Adrian's laugh was rich and warm in the darkness. "That might be challenging." "Will you regret this tomorrow?" she asked, sudden vulnerability coloring her voice. "Never." His response was immediate and fierce. "I might regret a lot of things, the years we lost, the timing, the complications this creates. But loving you, being with you, never." "Good," she said, settling back against his chest. "Because I meant what I said earlier. I'm not 18 anymore, and I'm not going to disappear quietly this time." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever obstacles we face, I'm not giving up on us again. We've had our second chance, and I'm not going to waste it." Adrian was quiet for so long that Lydia began to wonder if he'd fallen asleep. Then his voice came, soft but determined. "Marcus Walter wants you to sign a contract for 3 more years of international touring." "How did you—" "I heard him mention it this afternoon." "What will you tell him?" Lydia propped herself up on her elbow, meeting his gaze in the moonlight. "That depends on what you're willing to fight for." "Everything," he said without hesitation. "I'm willing to fight for everything. Even if it means scandal, even if people whisper about the former student who seduced her teacher, even if, though technically, I think I was the one doing the seducing tonight." "Adrian Sinclair," she said, leaning down to kiss him slowly, thoroughly. "I do believe you're finally learning to be a little reckless." "You bring out the reckless in me, Lydia Moreau. You always have." They made love again, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, this time with less desperation and more wonder. They had found their way back to each other across 12 years and 1,000 obstacles, and for now, that was miracle enough. As the sun rose on Sage's wedding day, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, both knowing that everything would change in a few hours, but neither willing to let go of this perfect moment that belonged only to them. The wedding preparations began early, with vendors arriving to transform the chapel and reception venue into the elegant celebration Sage had dreamed of. Adrian moved through his father of the bride duties with practiced grace, greeting guests, directing logistics, and ensuring every detail was perfect for his daughter's special day. But underneath the composed exterior, he carried the memory of Lydia's skin against his, the sound of her sighs in the darkness, the way she'd looked at him when she whispered that she loved him. Every smile he offered to well-meaning relatives, every conversation about weather and wedding details, felt surreal against the backdrop of the most profound night of his life. Lydia arrived at the chapel in full professional mode, elegant in a simple black performance dress, her hair swept into a sophisticated chignon. She moved with the controlled grace of someone accustomed to performing under pressure, setting up her equipment and running sound checks with efficient precision. When their eyes met across the busy chapel, the connection was immediate and electric. No one else seemed to notice the way they both went very still, the way the air between them seemed to shimmer with shared memory and unspoken promise. "Professor Sinclair?" Elena Santiago appeared at his elbow with her ever-present clipboard. "We need you to approve the final placement of the flowers at the altar." Adrian forced himself to look away from Lydia, to focus on his daughter's wedding instead of his own emotional upheaval. But as he discussed floral arrangements and photography angles, part of his mind remained fixed on the woman at the piano, the woman who had transformed his carefully ordered life in the span of a single night. The morning flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. Sage glowed with bridal radiance, her joy infectious as she hugged everyone who came within arm's reach. Jules remained steady and adoring at her side, clearly overwhelmed by his good fortune in winning such an extraordinary woman. As the ceremony time approached, guests began filling the chapel pews, their excited chatter creating a warm buzz of anticipation. Adrian stood at the back of the chapel in his formal attire, watching his daughter put the finishing touches on her appearance in the bridal suite, and felt the weight of the moment settling over him. After today, Sage would be married, beginning her own life adventure, and he would have to decide what he was going to do about the woman currently preparing to play the most beautiful music for his daughter's most important day. "Dad?" Sage appeared beside him in her wedding gown, and Adrian's breath caught. She looked radiant, sophisticated, and heartbreakingly young all at once. "Are you ready to walk me down the aisle?" "The question is, are you ready to be walked?" he replied, offering her his arm. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." She paused, studying his face with that perceptive intelligence that never failed to surprise him. "Are you okay? You seem different today. More alive somehow." Adrian felt heat rise in his cheeks. "It's your wedding day, sweetheart. Of course I'm emotional. That's not what this is." Sage's smile was knowing and gentle. "This is about her, isn't it? About Lydia." "Sage, Dad, I meant what I said last night. You deserve to be happy, and if she makes you happy—" Sage squeezed his arm. "Then I approve. It's complicated. All the best things are." She rose on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek. "Now come on, let's go get me married so you can figure out what you're going to do about your own love life." As the processional music began, Adrian felt a profound shift in his understanding of this day. It wasn't just about his daughter beginning her new life. It was about all of them stepping into unknown territory, trusting that love would guide them through whatever complications lay ahead. The ceremony was everything Sage had dreamed it would be. Lydia's performance was flawless, her music adding layers of emotion and beauty that transformed the already lovely service into something transcendent. Adrian walked his daughter down the aisle with pride and joy, gave his blessing to the union with genuine happiness, and watched Jules and Sage exchange vows with the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from seeing someone you love find their perfect match. But throughout the ceremony, he remained acutely aware of the woman at the piano, the way her fingers moved across the keys with the same reverent precision she'd used to touch his skin just hours before. When she played the recessional and their eyes met as he walked back down the aisle with the wedding party, the connection between them was so intense that several guests turned to look between them, sensing undercurrents they couldn't identify. The reception was held in the gardens adjacent to the chapel, with twinkling lights strung between ancient oak trees and round tables covered in ivory linens. Lydia performed during the cocktail hour, her repertoire chosen to enhance the elegant atmosphere while allowing conversations to flow naturally. Adrian fulfilled his father-of-the-bride obligations with grace and warmth, giving a toast that had half the guests in tears and the other half laughing with recognition at his obvious adoration for his daughter. He danced with Sage during the father-daughter dance, spinning her around the temporary dance floor while she giggled like the little girl she'd been not so long ago. But as the evening progressed, the weight of unfinished business between him and Lydia grew heavier. They managed to steal brief moments, a brush of fingers when he helped her move equipment, a shared smile when Sage and Jules had their first dance as husband and wife, a look of such intensity during the cake cutting that Marcus Walter's expression grew decidedly suspicious. It was Marcus who created the first real complication of the evening. "Lydia," he said, appearing at her side as she took a brief break from performing, "we need to discuss the Singapore contract. The venue is pressuring for an answer." "Not tonight, Marcus," she replied, not taking her eyes off the dance floor where Sage and Jules swayed together in perfect happiness. "When then? You've been avoiding this decision for weeks. Your career demands a certain level of commitment. My career is exactly that, mine." Lydia's voice carried a steely edge that made several nearby guests glance over with interest. "I'll make decisions about my future on my own timeline, not yours." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Is this about him?" His gaze shifted to Adrian, who was currently dancing with Sage's elderly aunt while making her laugh with some whispered joke. The bride's father who seems to command so much of your attention? I don't know what you mean, don't you? Because from where I'm standing, you've been watching him all evening like he's the most fascinating man you've ever met. Marcus, please keep your voice down. Is he the reason you're suddenly questioning your career trajectory? Some suburban music teacher who represents everything you left behind? The insult hung in the air like a discordant note. Adrian, despite being across the garden, seemed to sense the tension. His eyes found Lydia's, and the concern in his expression made her heart clench with protective instinct. Adrian Sinclair is one of the finest musicians I've ever known, she said quietly. And if you think geography or job title determines someone's worth, then you understand even less about me than I thought. Lydia? No. She stood, gathering her performance materials with controlled precision. I think I've entertained enough for one evening. As she began packing her equipment, Adrian excused himself from his dancing partner and made his way across the garden. Marcus intercepted him before he could reach Lydia. You must be Professor Sinclair, Marcus said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus Walter, Lydia's manager and close friend. Adrian accepted the handshake with polite wariness. Dr. Walter, I hope you're enjoying the celebration. It's lovely. Though I have to say, I'm curious about your connection to Lydia. She seems unusually invested in this particular performance. The challenge in Marcus's tone was unmistakable. Adrian felt something primitive and protective rise in his chest, the same instinct that had once made him want to shield 18-year-old Lydia from professors who questioned her abilities based on her background. Miss Moreau is an extraordinary artist, Adrian replied evenly. I'm honored she agreed to perform for my daughter's wedding. Yes, well, extraordinary artists often require careful management of their associations. Lydia's image is crucial to her international success. Her image? Surely you understand. A woman of her caliber, her earning potential, needs to be very selective about personal entanglements that might affect public perception. Adrian felt his jaw clench. Are you suggesting that knowing me would somehow damage Miss Moreau's reputation? I'm suggesting that small-town connections can sometimes hold back artists destined for global stages. Marcus? Lydia appeared beside them, her performance equipment packed and her expression thunderous. That's enough. Lydia, I'm simply looking out for your best interests. My best interests, she said, her voice dangerously quiet, are my own to determine. And they certainly don't include listening to you insult good people because you're threatened by connections you can't control. I'm not threatened, Marcus protested, but his glance toward Adrian suggested otherwise. Aren't you? Lydia stepped closer to Adrian, a gesture that was subtle but unmistakably claiming. Because it sounds like you're trying to manage who I spend time with, based on some outdated notion that my personal life is your professional concern. When your personal life affects your professional commitments, it doesn't. Her interruption was final. My performance tonight was flawless, as always. What I do when I'm not on stage is none of your business. Marcus's expression grew cold. I think you're making a mistake, Lydia. A very costly mistake. Then that's my mistake to make. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but Sage appeared at her father's elbow, radiant in her wedding gown and clearly oblivious to the undercurrents of tension. Lydia, she said warmly, your performance tonight has been absolutely magical. Everyone keeps asking me how we managed to book someone so talented. It's been my pleasure, Lydia replied, her demeanor softening immediately. You look absolutely radiant. Marriage suits you. It does, doesn't it? Sage glanced between her father and Lydia with knowing eyes. Dad, Jules and I are getting ready to leave for our honeymoon. Will you walk me to the car? As Adrian dutifully escorted his daughter to the waiting limousine, leaving Lydia to deal with Marcus's continued protests, he felt the evening's magic beginning to fray around the edges. The real world was intruding on their bubble of possibility, demanding answers and decisions neither of them was quite ready to make. After Sage and Jules departed in a shower of rice and good wishes, the reception began to wind down. Older guests made their farewells, vendors started cleanup, and the magical wedding atmosphere gradually gave way to the practical business of ending an event. Adrian found himself helping with logistics, ensuring tips were distributed and equipment was properly handled, while keeping one eye on Lydia's ongoing argument with Marcus Walter. The conversation looked increasingly heated, and Adrian had to restrain himself from intervening when Marcus grabbed Lydia's arm with more force than seemed necessary. "I think," Elena Santiago said, appearing beside Adrian with her characteristic efficiency, "that everything is well in hand here. Why don't you go handle whatever that situation is?" She nodded toward Lydia and Marcus. Adrian didn't need to be told twice. He crossed the garden just as Marcus was saying, "Career suicide, and you know it. 3 years in Singapore, some of the most prestigious venues in Asia. You can't throw that away for some nostalgic fantasy." "I'm not throwing anything away," Lydia replied, pulling her arm free of his grip. "I'm making a choice based on what I want for my life, not what you think will generate the most commission." "This is about him, isn't it?" Marcus's voice rose enough to draw attention from the remaining guests. "About some teacher who couldn't even pursue his own performing career?" "That's enough." Adrian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I think it's time for you to leave, Dr. Walter." Marcus turned to face him with undisguised hostility. "This is none of your concern, Professor. When you're creating a scene at my daughter's wedding reception and manhandling a lady, it becomes my concern." "Manhandling? Don't be ridiculous. I'm simply trying to talk sense into someone who's about to destroy her career for a middle-aged has-been who—" Adrian moved faster than he'd thought possible, closing the distance between them until Marcus had to step back or be forced into uncomfortable proximity. "You'll apologize to Miss Moreau," Adrian said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of controlled authority that had managed classrooms full of temperamental musicians for decades. "And then you'll leave quietly, without causing any further disruption to what's been a perfect evening." "I don't think so." Marcus straightened to his full height, trying to use his slight height advantage to intimidate. "I have every right to protect my client from making decisions that will ruin her reputation. Your client is a grown woman capable of making her own choices. If you can't respect that, perhaps she needs better representation." "Gentlemen." Lydia stepped between them, her professional composure firmly in place despite the tremor in her voice. "This is neither the time nor place for this discussion. Marcus, we'll talk tomorrow." "Will we?" "Because I get the feeling you've already made your decision." Marcus's gaze shifted between them with bitter understanding. "I hope he's worth what it's going to cost you, Lydia. Because once word gets out about this association, you'll find the classical music world much less welcoming than you remember." With that parting shot, he stalked away across the garden, leaving Adrian and Lydia alone among the fairy lights and the remnants of the reception. "I'm sorry," Adrian said immediately. "I shouldn't have escalated that situation." "Don't apologize!" Lydia's voice was fierce. "He was out of line, and you defended me. No one's done that in years. He threatened you. He threatened your career. Let him." Lydia lifted her chin with the same determination Adrian remembered from 18-year-old arguments about musical interpretation. "I meant what I said last night, Adrian. I'm not running away this time. But your career will survive. Maybe it will even thrive if I'm finally making music from an authentic place instead of constantly performing what other people expect." Adrian studied her face in the soft garden lighting, searching for any sign of doubt or regret. Instead, he found the same fierce certainty that had made her an extraordinary student and, he suspected, an even more extraordinary woman. "What are you saying, Lydia?" "I'm saying that I'm tired of being managed and marketed and told what's best for my image. I'm saying that for 12 years, I've been successful according to everyone else's definition, and I'm ready to find out what success means to me." "And what does it mean to you?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "It means playing music that moves people instead of just impressing them. It means working with musicians who inspire me instead of just paying me. It means being with someone who sees me as a person, not a brand or an asset or a trophy." "The complications are still there," she agreed. "The age difference, the former teacher-student relationship, the geographical challenges, the professional adjustments we'll both need to make. None of that has changed. Then what has? Me. I've changed. Tonight, lying in your arms, I remembered who I was before I became Lydia Moreau, the international sensation. I remembered the girl who fell in love with music because it was the most beautiful way to communicate with another human being. Adrian felt his defenses crumbling like sandcastles at high tide. Lydia, I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now, she said. I'm just asking you not to send me away again. Let's figure it out together this time. The garden around them had grown quiet, most of the cleanup crew having moved indoors. Overhead, the string lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird sang a liquid melody that seemed to underscore the moment's significance. Adrian reached for her hands, intertwining their fingers with the same reverence he'd shown the night before. If we do this, really do this, there's no timeline, no expiration date on the complications. Are you prepared for that? Are you? I've been preparing for 12 years, he said. I just didn't know it. Then yes, she said simply. Let's figure it out together. This time, when they kissed, it was with the full weight of their decision behind it, not the desperate claiming of the chapel or the wondering exploration of the night before, but the steady, sure kiss of two people who had chosen each other despite every rational argument against it. When they broke apart, both were smiling. So, Lydia said, what happens now? Now, Adrian replied, we go inside, help finish the cleanup from my daughter's perfect wedding, and then we start our own adventure. What kind of adventure? The kind where a world-famous pianist and a small-town music teacher figure out how to build a life that makes room for both their dreams. Sounds complicated. Sounds perfect. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the chapel where their story had begun 24 hours and 12 years ago, ready to write the next chapter together. Chapter 3. 3 weeks after Sage's wedding, Adrian stood in the wings of the Harmony Conservatory's concert hall, adjusting his formal attire and trying to calm nerves he hadn't felt since his own student days. Tonight marked his return to public performance after 18 years of focusing solely on teaching, and the irony wasn't lost on him that Lydia had been the catalyst for rediscovering this forgotten part of himself. The concert hall buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread through the local music community that Professor Adrian Sinclair would be performing again, and the venue had sold out within days. But what the audience didn't know was that this performance would mark more than just his return to the stage. It would be his public declaration of love for the woman who had transformed his life. 5 minutes, Professor, the stage manager whispered. Adrian nodded, his hands finding the familiar weight of sheet music in his pocket. Not his usual repertoire of classical standards, but something far more personal, the completion of Lydia's song, the composition he'd struggled with for 12 years and had finally finished with her help 3 nights ago. Are you ready? Lydia appeared beside him, elegant in a midnight blue gown that made her skin luminous under the backstage lights. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd made the difficult decision to decline the Singapore contract, instead accepting a position as visiting artist at the conservatory that would allow her to maintain her performance career while building something real with Adrian. The decision hadn't been without consequences. Marcus Walter had made good on his threats, spreading whispers throughout the international classical music community about Lydia's unprofessional entanglements and career suicide. Several prestigious venues had quietly withdrawn invitations, and at least 2 major orchestras had delayed discussions about future collaborations. But Lydia had weathered the storm with grace and determination, supported by Adrian's unwavering faith in her talent and her own growing certainty that authenticity mattered more than reputation. I'm terrified, Adrian admitted, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. Good. Terror means it matters to you. She reached up to still his restless hands. Besides, you're not doing this alone anymore. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of discovery and adjustment. They'd navigated the delicate process of going public with their relationship, starting with Sage, who had received the news with delighted satisfaction and immediately begun planning double dates with Jules. Dr. Evelyn Moreau had been less enthusiastic, requiring several tense phone conversations before grudgingly accepting that her daughter was determined to make her own choices. The conservatory administration had raised eyebrows at their unconventional relationship, but Adrian's sterling reputation and Lydia's undeniable talent had smoothed most concerns. The classical music community's reaction had been more mixed, ranging from supportive colleagues who remembered their obvious connection from years past, to critics who whispered about inappropriate relationships and professional opportunism. Through it all, Adrian and Lydia had grown closer, their relationship deepening beyond the initial passion into something steady and sustaining. They'd learned each other's daily rhythms, navigated the practical challenges of combining their lives, and discovered that the connection they'd shared as teacher and student had evolved into something even more profound between equals. Places, everyone. Adrian took a deep breath, then surprised himself by reaching for Lydia's hand. "Come with me." "What?" "Come with me. Play with me. The way we did that night in my study." Lydia's eyes widened. "Adrian, this is your performance, your return to the stage. It's our performance, our return. Everything that led to this moment, we did together." For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then her face transformed, with the radiant smile he'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Hand in hand, they walked onto the stage together. The audience stirred with surprise and interest as they saw not one performer, but two, not the solo piano recital they'd expected, but something entirely unprecedented. Adrian approached the microphone with Lydia beside him, and the hall fell silent with anticipation. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the concert hall. "When I planned this performance, I intended it to mark my return to public playing after many years focused on teaching. But as I prepared for tonight, I realized that returning to something you once loved isn't nearly as powerful as discovering something you never knew existed." Murmurs rippled through the audience. 12 years ago, I taught a remarkable young woman who possessed one of the most extraordinary musical gifts I'd ever encountered. She went on to achieve international acclaim, performing with the world's greatest orchestras and earning recognition as one of the finest pianists of her generation. Adrian's gaze found Lydia's, drawing strength from her encouraging smile. What I didn't tell her then, what I couldn't tell her, was that she had taught me just as much as I had taught her. She reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place, not for perfection or accolades, but for the profound human connection that happens when souls communicate through sound. The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. 3 weeks ago, she walked back into my life during my daughter's wedding, and in the time since, she has given me the greatest gift a teacher can receive. She has become my teacher in return, showing me that it's never too late to rediscover passion, to take risks, to choose love over safety. Adrian stepped closer to the microphone, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "Tonight, I want to share with you a composition I began 12 years ago but could never finish. It's called Lydia's Song, and like all the best music, it required two voices to find its complete expression." He turned to face Lydia fully, speaking directly to her now despite the hundreds of people watching. "Lydia Moreau, you are the most gifted musician I've ever known, the most courageous woman I've ever met, and the love I thought I'd lost forever. Will you help me finish our song?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Then Lydia stepped forward, her voice clear and strong as it carried through the silent hall. "Adrian Sinclair, you taught me that music is a conversation between hearts. You showed me that technique without emotion is just noise, but emotion without discipline is just chaos. You gave me the foundation that made everything else possible." She paused, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And yes, I will help you finish our song. I will help you finish all of them." The applause that erupted was unlike anything Adrian had ever heard, not just appreciation for a performance, but recognition of something real and profound happening before their eyes. Together, they moved to the grand piano, Adrian taking the main bench while Lydia positioned herself at the upper register. The opening notes of Lydia's Song filled the concert hall, and immediately the audience understood they were hearing something unprecedented. The composition was a musical, Conversation that told the story of their relationship, tentative and formal at first, reflecting the careful boundaries of teacher and student, then growing more complex and intertwined as the themes developed, representing the deepening connection they'd been forced to deny. The middle movement was all longing and separation, heartbreak translated into haunting melodies that seemed to reach toward each other across an impossible distance. But the final movement, the resolution they had composed together in his study just days before, was pure joy. Their melodies danced around each other, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in playful counterpoint, always in perfect balance. It was the musical embodiment of two people who had found their way back to each other against all odds. As the final notes faded into reverent silence, Adrian and Lydia remained seated at the piano, hands still on the keys, overwhelmed by what they had just shared. The audience erupted. People leaped to their feet, applause thundering through the hall with an intensity that spoke of genuine emotional connection. But Adrian heard none of it. His attention was focused entirely on the woman beside him, the woman who had just helped him reclaim not just his performing career, but his capacity for joy. "How do you feel?" Lydia asked softly, her voice barely audible above the continued ovation. "Complete," he replied simply. They rose together, hands linked, and faced the audience. The applause continued for what felt like hours, but eventually the crowd began to settle, though the energy in the hall remained electric. "Thank you," Adrian said into the microphone, his arm around Lydia's waist. "Thank you for witnessing not just a performance, but a homecoming. Music, like love, is most beautiful when it's shared." As they left the stage together, Adrian felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. For 18 years, he had convinced himself that teaching was enough, that living vicariously through his students' successes could substitute for pursuing his own dreams. But standing beside Lydia, feeling the audience's genuine appreciation for something they had created together, he understood the difference between existing and truly living. What would you do if society told you your love was inappropriate, but your heart knew it was real? Have you ever had to choose between following your heart and meeting others' expectations? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about love that refuses to be denied. Backstage, they were surrounded by well-wishers and colleagues, everyone eager to congratulate them on the extraordinary performance. Sage and Jules had driven up from their honeymoon location specifically for the concert, and Sage's tears of pride and joy made Adrian's chest tight with emotion. "Dad, that was incredible," she said, embracing both him and Lydia together. "I've never heard you play like that before." "I've never felt like that before," he admitted. "Well, you better get used to it," Jules added with a grin, "because from the sound of that applause, people are going to want more." He was right. Over the next hour, as they mingled with the audience at the post-concert reception, Adrian and Lydia were approached by representatives from recording labels, concert venues, and music festivals. The buzz around their unexpected collaboration was immediate and intense. "This could be something significant," Lydia murmured to Adrian, as they finally found a quiet corner of the reception hall. "If you want it to be." "What do you mean?" "I mean we could tour together, not just occasionally, but as a partnership. There's clearly an audience for what we create together." Adrian considered the possibility. A few months ago, the idea would have seemed impossible. He was a small-town teacher with a comfortable, predictable life. But standing here, still glowing from the most fulfilling performance of his life, surrounded by people who had been genuinely moved by their music, he found himself seriously considering a future he'd never imagined. "What about your solo career? Your international reputation?" "My solo career will always be there. But this," she gestured between them, encompassing not just their musical partnership, but everything else they'd built together. "This is once in a lifetime." Before Adrian could respond, Dr. Evelyn Moreau appeared beside them, elegant and composed as always, but with something softer in her expression than he'd seen before. "Lydia," she said, embracing her daughter with genuine warmth. "That was extraordinary, both of you." "Mother, I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," Evelyn admitted. I've been so focused on protecting your career, on ensuring you maintained the trajectory we worked so hard to build that I lost sight of something important." "What's that?" Evelyn's gaze shifted to Adrian, and he was surprised to see respect rather than suspicion in her eyes. "That the most beautiful music comes from authentic emotion, not carefully managed image. Tonight, watching you perform together, I heard my daughter truly happy for the first time in years." The simple statement carried the weight of acceptance, and Adrian felt another barrier fall away. "Professor Sinclair," Evelyn continued, "I owe you an apology. I've spent weeks worrying that you would derail Lydia's career, when perhaps what you've done is help her find the path she was always meant to walk." "Dr. Moreau." "Evelyn, please. I think we're going to be seeing quite a lot of each other." As the reception began to wind down, Adrian and Lydia found themselves alone on the conservatory's terrace, overlooking the moonlit campus where their story had begun so many years ago. "So," Lydia said, settling into his arms with the ease of someone who had found her perfect fit, "what do you think? Ready to become a touring musician at 54? With you? I'm ready for anything. Even if it means starting over, learning new venues, new audiences, new challenges." Adrian thought about the question seriously. A year ago, even a month ago, the idea of upending his carefully constructed life would have terrified him. But something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of what it meant to truly live. "Do you know what I realized tonight?" he said finally. "What?" "That I've spent the last 18 years being a very good teacher to everyone except myself. I taught my students to take risks, to pursue their passions, to trust their artistic instincts, but I played it safe, chose comfort over growth, convinced myself that security was more important than dreams. And now? Now I think maybe it's time I started following my own advice." Lydia tilted her head back to look at him, and in the moonlight she looked exactly like the 18-year-old girl who had first stolen his heart and the accomplished woman who had won it back again. "Does that mean yes? To touring, to recording, to building something together that neither of us could create alone?" "It means yes to all of it, to the music, to the adventures, to the complications and challenges, and beautiful impossibilities." He paused, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "It means yes to us in all the ways we can imagine, and some we probably can't. Even knowing that people will always whisper about the former student and her teacher. Let them whisper. What we have is real, and it's ours, and it's beautiful. That's all that matters." "I love you, Adrian Sinclair." "I love you too, Lydia Moreau. More than I ever thought possible." They kissed under the stars, surrounded by the place where their story began, ready to write new chapters filled with music and love and the kind of courage that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary ones. 6 months later, Adrian stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, adjusting his formal attire and marveling at how much his life had changed. The past half year had been a whirlwind of recording sessions, concert tours, and media interviews as he and Lydia established themselves as a duo act that was taking the classical music world by storm. Their album, Songs We Never Finished, had debuted at #1 on the classical charts and had garnered critical acclaim for its innovative approach to collaborative composition. Tonight's Carnegie Hall debut as a duo was completely sold out, with a waiting list that stretched into the thousands. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. "Still nervous?" Lydia appeared beside him in a stunning black gown, her hair swept up to showcase the diamond earrings he'd given her for her birthday. "Always," Adrian admitted, "but it's the good kind of nervous now. The kind that means it matters." Exactly. They had developed rituals over the months of touring together, small moments of connection that centered them before each performance. Tonight, Lydia reached for his, hands intertwining their fingers with the same reverence they brought to their music. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About that 18-year-old girl who used to argue with me about Rachmaninoff's intentions. And how grateful I am that she grew up into a woman brave enough to come back and argue with me about life's intentions." Lydia's laugh was soft and musical. She's grateful too, that her teacher finally learned the most important lesson of all. Which is, That the most beautiful music happens when you stop playing it safe and start playing from the heart. Places, everyone. They walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage hand in hand, faces bright with the particular joy that comes from doing exactly what you're meant to do with exactly the person you're meant to do it with. The audience welcomed them with thunderous applause, but Adrian barely heard it. His attention was focused on the woman beside him, the grand piano waiting for them, and the music they were about to create together. As they took their places at the piano, Adrian caught sight of Sage and Jules in the front row, both beaming with pride and excitement. Behind them sat Evelyn Moreau, elegant and composed, but with tears of joy evident in her eyes. And scattered throughout the sold-out hall were colleagues, friends, and music lovers who had come not just to hear a performance, but to witness something rare and beautiful. Two people who had found their way back to each other across time and obstacles and doubt. "Ready?" Lydia asked softly, her fingers poised above the keys. "Ready," Adrian confirmed. Together they began to play, their music filling the legendary hall with sounds that spoke of love, found, lost, and found again. Of dreams deferred but not abandoned, of the courage it takes to choose authenticity over security, passion over propriety, and love over fear. In the audience, people wept and smiled and felt their hearts expand with recognition of something true and beautiful. But on stage, Adrian and Lydia were lost in their own world, a world made of melody and harmony, of shared glances and synchronized breathing, of the profound intimacy that comes from creating something magnificent together. When the final notes faded into reverent silence, they remained at the piano for a moment, hands still on the keys, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the journey that had brought them to this moment. Then, Carnegie Hall erupted in the kind of ovation that performers dream of, thunderous, sustained, genuinely emotional. People leaped to their feet, tears streaming down their faces, applauding not just the technical perfection of the performance, but the authentic emotion that had infused every note. Adrian and Lydia rose together, hands linked, and faced the audience that had just witnessed their declaration of love made audible. As they took their bows, Adrian thought about the path that had led them here, the mistakes and missed opportunities, the years of separation and longing, the courage it had taken to try again. Sometimes, he reflected, the most beautiful songs are the ones that take a lifetime to finish. Sometimes, love requires patience and second chances and the wisdom to know when to fight for what matters most. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to discover that the best music of your life begins not when you're young and fearless, but when you're old enough to know the value of what you've found and brave enough to claim it regardless of what anyone else might say. As the applause continued and the audience began calling for an encore, Adrian looked at the woman beside him, his former student, his current partner, his greatest love, and knew that whatever songs they wrote next, they would write them together. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the courage to play your heart's true song, regardless of who might disapprove of the melody. Adrian and Lydia discovered that authentic love doesn't diminish with time or social pressure. It deepens, waiting for the moment when both people are brave enough to claim it. Their story reminds us that it's never too late to choose passion over propriety, connection over convention, and the vulnerable beauty of real love over the safe distance of unfulfilled longing. Have you ever had to choose between a love that others questioned and the safety of staying alone? What would you do if your heart's deepest desire required you to risk everything you've built? Share your thoughts about Adrian and Lydia's journey in the comments below. I love hearing how these stories connect with your own experiences. Don't forget to like this video if their love story moved you, and subscribe if you want more tales about the courage it takes to love authentically. Tomorrow's story will explore another couple brave enough to fight for their impossible love. Until then, remember that the most beautiful relationships often bloom in the most unexpected gardens.